Good afternoon and welcome to this Fleet News webinar on mitigating risk and managing road incidents sponsored by Webfleet. Some of you will know that receiving a call from the police about a driver being killed or seriously injured in a road collision is a distressing experience, but thankfully it is one that is unfamiliar for many fleet managers. However, you will all be used to dealing with many smaller incidents on a weekly or monthly basis. We've brought together a panel of experts to discuss proactive strategies that fleets can implement to mitigate all types of incident and enhance their overall road safety, protecting drivers on the road and navigating the aftermath of serious crashes. So, over the course of the next hour, we will look at your legal responsibilities, the processes that you should implement and follow, intervention measures, and the role of technology and data. I'm delighted to welcome my panel of experts. We have Matt Thomas, Fleet Director at Bill Plant Driving School, Alison Moriarty, Managing Director at Beverley Bell Consulting and also a magistrate, Aaron Powell, Fleet and Logistics Director at Speedy Hire, Sarah Wellstead, Senior Fleet Coordinator at Hoare Lea, Lesley O'Brien, Managing Director at Freightlink Europe, and from our sponsor partner Webfleet, Jason Gill, Sales Director at Channel UKI. Please get involved in today's webinar. You can ask your own questions or you can add your own comments in the chat box on your dashboard. Before we get into the agenda, I just want to say that the opinions expressed by our panelists during this webinar are their personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect their company policy. And just a heads up that our own Fleet News Fleet Safety Report will be published on our website on February the 27th. You can bookmark the page via the link that I'll put into the chat shortly. Right, before we get stuck into the conversation, I'm going to hand over to Jason to give a brief overview of today's topic with some Webfleet research findings. Jason.
Thanks, Stephen. Hopefully you can see that okay. Firstly, thanks for letting us get involved with this today. Obviously, improving safety is core to our solutions, be it telematics and cameras or indeed tyres via our parent company at Bridgestone. The webinar actually coincides with the launch of our Fleet Safety Report, which we've produced in partnership with our friends at Lytx. So for context, we've conducted external research via 200 fleet decision makers. So it's not our client base, it's 200 random fleets with an even split across HGV and LCV. If you'd like to access the full report, then please scan the QR code, which you'll see on this slide and all the other ones, or look for our social media posts. For today, I'm just sharing some of the feedback we've received, but the report itself has got about 31 pages, so it's some really useful information on there. We asked a few questions around the use of technology, as you'd probably understand. Which included the use of telematics and cameras, but also evolving vehicle technology like ADAS, etc. So the feedback we saw was, significantly positive in terms of the role that fleets saw in in-cab feedback or coaching, as some people like to call it. So be that AI cameras or telematics, it's certainly on the rise. And I'd imagine a lot of that is around probably limited fleet resource and the ability to get around and talk to drivers. So if you can actually get them to coach themselves, that's certainly a positive move. And following on from that previous slide, I guess these types of solutions are seen as improving safety over the coming years as well and over the next decade. So we're certainly seeing more requests for both telematics and cameras and even the driver-facing AI cameras now, so we can look at certain behaviours like looking at mobile phones and fatigue and all those sorts of areas. Fleets have generally seen an increase in insurance claim and costs. Some have seen a reduction, and we guess that hopefully that's where they've actually put really good preventative measures in place. But yeah, I mean, it plays a big decision factor for investing in technology is insurance premiums. And we see that in the questions that we asked in the survey. And finally, I guess from a driver perspective, we're showing some quite positive feedback in terms of assessing and supporting mental well-being after an incident. Perhaps still some work to do on the van side of things, but we're showing progress. And that's the end. As I said, it was just a snippet. Please scan the QR code, and there's lots of useful feedback in there.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Yeah, we'll talk about some of the technology and as we come on to the discussion. But just for a bit of context, I suppose starting at the beginning, I'm going to ask you for each of our panelists just to give a brief overview, those with the fleets, of their fleet profile and how they're working to reduce the number of incidents, the number of crashes their drivers are involved in. Aaron, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, of course. Hi, Stephen. Hi, everyone. So fleet size is 1,674 vehicles in total, of which 236 are HGVs, 804 are LCVs, and 634 company cars. What we're trying to do to mitigate accidents, everything possible, although they seem to go up everywhere. But some of the things we've fitted, so in the HGVs, we fitted force field, which is around the vehicle. So in the evening, the front and the rear, it shows not only an item or a person, but also tells you what it is in front of you and rear. And luckily, none of those vehicles have had an accident that we fitted that in. We fitted the halo system to the HGVs, which is like the cycle down the side. So when the vehicle's turning, it illuminates the road and shows where the vehicle's going to turn. We have cameras, multiple cameras around the vehicles, multiple sensors, and we're just in the process of installing Samsara. It is our new telematics and in-cab coaching system. So, yeah, everything we possibly can, including training, e-learning. We have one-to-one driver coaching. We have our own driver assessors. So, yeah, everything you can think of, really.
Okay.
Be interesting to see what everyone else is doing as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into some of that as we get into the conversation. So, Matt, if I can come to you, very different fleet, very different profile. You just talked a little bit about what you're doing and what your fleet looks like.
Yeah, happy to, Stephen, and afternoon, everyone. So we're a national driving school. We've got a fleet of about 1,150 vehicles, all of which are cars. We're not a fleet operator. We issue our vehicles to self-employed driving instructors, which are then obviously used by their learner drivers, which clearly comes with a risk of its own type. But what we're hoping that we're doing as a business is putting safer drivers of the future onto the roads. And our focus is very much on driving as a lifelong skill. It's not about how to teach someone to pass a test. It's about how to turn them into good, solid drivers. So from a safety perspective, at a high level, we're all about that wraparound support and the level of training and the quality of training that we provide, not just to our pupils, but to the instructors that are supervising them. And all of our instructors, before they're even allowed to take a vehicle, have to pass quite rigorous tests. Some are set by the government, some are added in by ourselves. That includes in-car assessments. We're actually now providing them with over 200 hours worth of material. At least half of that is compulsory. So we're really setting that standard from day one. And our aim really is to be as proactive as we can be, identify the risks and address them, but address them as transparently up front as you can. So ultimately for us, it's about creating that culture where we're driving the behavior of safety, but we're not seeing it as an add-on or an afterthought. It's just part of the mindset of what we do, and our drivers are taking that in a very positive way.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Sarah, can you give us a flavour of your fleet and your safety journey to date?
Thank you, Stephen. So our fleet's very different. We are a firm of consulting engineers. So the primary function of them is to sit and think about the big problems in the built environment. And so I'd say my biggest problem would be getting them to see driving as a risky activity, because it's not what they think as their job. The fleet's quite small, but growing. We're at 133. We are 90% electric, which is a real positive for me. But our biggest risk is the grey fleet, which is 4 times bigger each month, 4 times more people claiming mileage in a private car than a business car. But we do have over 700 people who've answered yes to the "Do you drive for work?" So it might be that they only do one journey a year, or it could be that they do every week. So again, that's another big risk. So what we've been doing is started off with the Driving for Business, Better Business gap analysis quite a few years ago now. That was a really good place for me to start. We then reviewed all of our driving compliance documents, and we've now, I think we're on the 3rd iteration now of our current driving policy, driver handbook, and the risk assessment that backs that up. From an education point of view, we've been, as well as those compliance documents, which are hosted on a platform where drivers have to annually read and accept. We also drip feed driving safety information. We have an internal social media platform, and then we have an intranet page where we focus on that.
Okay, thank you for that. Lesley, looking at your backdrop, you can see you're a very different fleet, got a lot of the heavy stuff. So tell us a bit about your fleet and your safety journey. Oh, I think you're on mute at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, we are a different fleet, a lot smaller than the people here, 35 vehicles ranging from vans, 7.5, 18, 26-ton vehicles and articulated vehicles. As anybody on the call with a transport company will know, that insurance crashes, it's one of our biggest nightmares. We don't want to have that. So right from the very beginning and through employment, we need to instill a culture of safety for the driver, our vehicles, and on the roads. And that starts with recruitment. Asking the right questions at recruitment, making sure you're getting in through the door the right driver, not putting them out on the road for a driving assessment until they've had a drug and alcohol test. And quite a few you can kind of get rid of straight away by doing the drug and alcohol test. Taking references, which isn't easy, but you can normally read between the lines. And then, of course, the induction is the real opportunity for us to instill our culture, discussing our policies, our safe systems of work, talking about speed, sat navs, safe loading, mobile phones, all of these things. The drivers have to know that we will be monitoring. With regard to incidents on the road, we investigate every single incident. The drivers have an app that they record it, hopefully real time. They don't go away there and then. It goes on the app. It comes straight to us. It goes straight to our broker, and we investigate every incident with an external incident investigator. And that is just so I don't drag the driver by the neck and yell at him. They can have this objective conversation, and the investigator can go back and maybe we're doing something wrong. Q code for drivers reporting near misses that they can anonymise, so that we can look at every near miss to make sure that, you know, this doesn't become an incident. We have monthly safety forums, which involves a driver, our insurers and the planners, that we can look at what's happened, we can look at the statistics, and we can see how we can improve. And then on a weekly and monthly basis, I am looking at performance. The drivers have an app that they can see how they are performing and if their score is improving, and we discuss this. And it's vital to review, which isn't easy, and share the information. And then on top of all that, we have monthly toolbox talks that the drivers have to complete.
Okay, thanks for that. Alison, you've got a lot of experience at the coalface on safety with fleets, and obviously now you're helping other fleets to improve their compliance and their sort of risk management. Can you give us some sort of top level thoughts around best practice for fleets?
Yeah, I think Lesley covered quite a lot of the really important points there, because I think a lot of it is around right at the very beginning, making sure you get the right drivers, and that is either, you know, driver assessments, doing license checks before you take a driver on, because do you want to take a driver on who's had a drink drive or a drug drive conviction at some point? You might want to, but you might want to put extra things in place. So I think that's really, really important. And then for me, the induction, and that's a proper driver induction, not just your work induction generally, but a specific driver induction, because you have to set the standard right from the beginning, so that driver knows what's expected of them every single time they get in your vehicle and go out on the road. Really, really important, because if you don't show that it's important to you as a company, why should the driver care? And I think, you know, when we start to look at data, so I'm very much a human-led person. So for me, it's all about making sure that the driver and the transport manager are doing the right things. But without the data, how do you know who those people are? And I've used data in almost every job I've been. Actually, Webfleet, when I was in a very large fleet, was my telematics provider. And that was about looking at that and not waiting until there's an incident, which a lot of companies do, and then they look at the telematics data and say, oh, this guy's been speeding 50% of his time. You have to be, and as Lesley said, it's really not easy, but you have to be on top of that data the whole time, because you can prevent some of the stuff we're going to talk about happening. So I think it really is about culture. And from, I think Sarah made a great point as well, that people don't always see driving as part of the job. And I think getting people to understand from the beginning, not only is driving a work activity, it's got the highest mortality rate of any work activity apart from coal mining and deep sea fishing. So really important, actually, guys, that we get this right. So that's my sort of, it's all about drivers understanding what's expected of them, then monitoring them, and then consequences, which I'm sure we'll come on to later, where maybe the standards start to slip.
And Trevor makes the point as well in the chat around, doesn't matter whether it's their primary role or a secondary role, it's the risk is identical. Lesley and Alison both mentioned data and the role of data. Jason, that nicely brings me to you for some kind of thoughts around the kind of risk management play.
Yeah, I think Alison made some really good points there. It's about getting drivers engaged. I think especially when you introduce technology into the vehicle, and the drivers can get initially quite defensive about that. So it's making sure they're engaged, and that it's not about Big Brother. It's about safety for the driver and for the public at large. And again, in terms of what Alison said there, it's about spotting trends. It's about preventing an incident rather than managing the after effects. So the data is ever improving. AI is now coming into our platform and into others, so you can really start to see those trends, to the point where we get to it really looking at, perhaps these drivers are an accident waiting to happen, and here's the data to support it, and then obviously whatever training is going to follow up on that. So no, I think really good feedback across the panel there. It's a nice mixed panel, so it's good to see so many good things going on.
We'll talk about the technology in just a minute, although I'm sure it will play into this next question anyway. So if we look at intervention measures, what do you employ with your drivers, and how do you decide when and for whom to deploy them? Lesley, if I can come to you, how are you kind of getting in there and being sort of proactive with your drivers?
Okay, so as I've said, we investigate every single incident, no matter how small. It could just be a bollard, but these small incidents add up to bigger incidents. So we look at every single one. Gone are the days when a driver has an incident and you go down the disciplinary route. Those people in the audience will know that the driver shortage is long from being over, and the disciplinary route can just drive a driver to go and maybe taking that problem to another transport company. So we're really looking at proactive education. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What can we do to prevent it? Yes, we're looking at statistics, but let's not forget as well, we're dealing with human beings, and they all have things going on in their lives, financial worries, divorce, ill health, and sometimes a listening ear to that can really encourage a driver and kind of know that we are there to help. So investigate everyone, and by having this external investigator, some of the information that can come back are things that we need to do within the office, not just the driver. It does create extra work, because sometimes, well, nearly every time we're getting the driver in for another toolbox talk, we're probably sending them out for another driver assessment on the road. But clearly disciplinary is not the initial route. Yes, it has a place. If we're talking about mobile phone use, drinking and drugs, failing to secure totally a load, we would be going down the disciplinary route. But first of all, we're looking at educating, nurturing, communicating and training.
So moving from the trucks to the cars, Matt, moving to you, what intervention measures do you deploy on with your learner drivers, your driving instructors?
Learner drivers is a challenging one because arguably every single lesson is a reassessment. So you hope that they're listening to their instructor and taking on board everything that they're being taught. We're the same as Lesley. You know, we do post-accident interviews regardless of how serious the issue is, regardless of where liability may or may not sit, and we're looking for the patterns. You know, we treat them as humans as well. We're discussing with them what their training needs are on a regular basis, not just after any incident, because it's too late after that's happened. And we're looking at all the various tools and support that we can make available to them. If a driver, just as an example, has a multiple incident within a certain time window, and that's quite a short period of time, we do keep the pressure up after the first one, and we do expect them to do a compulsory in-car reassessment. And we can use any findings from that assessment to feed back through a trained trainer, a senior trainer, and look at how we can improve it. You know, it's not about punishing them. It's not about making them feel that they've made a mistake. It's okay, this has happened. What do we learn from this? But we do need to take a bespoke approach to each driver. You know, everybody is human. Everybody responds to different things in different ways. But for me, the trick really is find the approach that resonates with that individual and just be honest, have a transparent and productive conversation with them. But most importantly, make sure that that conversation actually delivers some real outcomes at the end of it. Don't just have a chat, come up with a plan afterwards and take some actions away that you can then monitor and report back on.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron, same question to you around intervention measures across your fleet.
Very similar, Stephen, to be fair. So we all, you know, post-accident investigations. We also have what we call a PAR group, which post-accident review group. So we review every month all the accidents that have happened in that month and what measures we can do to try and stop that going forward. But telematics plays a big part in prevention rather than, you know, after the fact. Is trying to find that person who you think is going to have an accident by the way their driving style is. So are they always speeding? Are they always harsh braking, harsh cornering? Do they pick up the mobile phone? You know, are they not wearing the seatbelt? All of those things you try and cut out before it gets to the accident stage. But we, you know, like I said, we've got driver trainers who go out and one-to-one with them as well. So, yeah.
So talking about you know, trying to cut things out before they occur. What about near misses? So Sarah, could I come to you? Do you consider near misses, and if so, how do you measure them, and what actions do you take?
Yeah, we do record near misses. So the driver policy and the driver handbook both direct drivers to the fact that they need to report it. And again, with the kind of fleet that we have, it's just about reiterating that, because people just don't see when they're in their car that that's to do with work. So yeah, they do need to report it via their local health and safety rep. And then the health and safety reps have a monthly forum, which I'm invited to more often than not. And then we discuss what the near miss was, and then if there's any actions that we could do to prevent that situation from happening again. The health and safety forum is also, because we are very lucky, we don't have too many incidents, it's also a good place to raise awareness amongst the health and safety reps about driving as a risky activity. And they did show a near miss from another company that had been reported on the HSE website. So it just helps to get the message across.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, come back to you on your fleet in terms of near misses. Is something that you look at?
Yes, absolutely. We handle near misses in exactly the same way as we would any incident that had an impact. We report them to our insurers as well, who are more than happy for us to do that. It helps them get ahead of the game. If, you know, let's face it, there's a slightly different interpretation of events by another party. There'll be many people on this call that have their company logo, their phone number, their website plastered all over their vehicles, and it can encourage some third parties to put spurious claims in. If you're already ahead of the game, you're a step ahead. We also do it because it encourages our instructors to understand the process. You know, it creates that openness and the feeling that they can report anything. But by doing it, they're then familiar with the types of information that they might be asked for when it comes to a real event. They're getting used to capturing the right information at the scene of an incident. But also, we want to acknowledge those that are actually doing something good, which in this area can be challenging sometimes. But a near miss, arguably, is a more serious incident that's been averted. Now, we do something called intervention training, which is a slightly different use of the word intervention, maybe. But this is essentially how a driving instructor can control both a car and a pupil from the passenger seat, which involves using dual controls, grabbing the steer wheel, various influencing techniques. And by recording the near misses, that helps us to really start to see which of our instructors are taking that on board and either not having an incident in the first place or potentially having a much less serious incident where the impact isn't as severe. That clearly then makes the cost of repairs less as well. And we're definitely seeing that as part of our reporting on near misses. So for us, it's very important.
Alison, do you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, it's only a very quick point, really, and it kind of ties in with what Matt's just said. We stopped calling our events near misses and started calling them near hits because they are a miss. And I know that sounds like semantics, but actually it does make a different impact when you think of it as a near hit. So for me, a van mounting a curb next to a bus stop's not a near miss. That could have taken out a bus stop full of people. And I think in terms of, you know, when you investigate them, I think this is, you know, exactly what Matt was saying. It's about what was the potential had things just been slightly different for that incident. So I think, you know, they should be investigated with the same rigour as you investigate something that's actually happened. So I would just urge people to maybe think about that terminology because it did make a difference to how we looked at them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Much the same way, I guess, that you know, there's a campaign around dropping the use of the word accidents and, you know, focus on crashes or collisions or incidents, which I know something that's been going on for a number of times. And you know, the late Dr. Will Murray was a very big advocate of not using the word accident. Well, we saw from Jason's presentation about the positive impact that technology can have in reducing crashes. So, what role does it play in your approach to risk management? Aaron, I'll come to you first because I know you do use quite a bit of technology on your fleet. So what are you using? How are you using it? What's the benefits? Aaron, you're just on mute.
Sorry, I think I named most of it in my opening speech. But yeah, so we've got all kinds of technology, and I think it plays two parts. It does stop. It gives you that view of who you think is going to have an accident by the way their driving styles is and everything else. But I also think, and we send out weekly reports to the line managers of the drivers who are doing all of these things, speeding, harsh braking, and all the rest of it, for them to deal with on a one-to-one basis. But I also think it has the negative effect as well, because I think too much technology is causing problems with people. So you've got 4 or 5 cameras in the cab, you've got buzzers going off left, right, and centre, you've got all of these things going on around you, and you're trying to concentrate on driving as well. So I think it can have a negative effect. I think accidents, especially in company cars, have gone up because we're becoming lazy drivers. I think because we're expecting the technology to do the work for us, so that when something does happen, we're quite slow to react because our brains are switching off. We've got sat-nav telling us which way to go. We've got lane departure stopping us coming out the lanes. We've got auto cruise control and everything like that. So I think we need it. We definitely need it. But I think sometimes too much of it is causing a bigger issue as well.
Mm-hmm. Lesley, I mean, you've touched on some of the technology that you use on your fleet. Can you just talk a little bit more about, you know, how you're using it and the benefits of it?
Yeah, I just concur with everything that Aaron said. Sometimes it can be too much for the driver, and also it can be too much for the company as well. Analysing it, and you need to make sure that you're getting it in the right bite sizes. You know, if my solicitor was with me, she would say it would be easier to defend a company that had no data than a company that had loads of data and they weren't doing anything with it. So I'm really working with Webfleet to get my data in bite-sized portions and dealing with a little bit at a time. So at the moment, my weekly focus is on speed, because of course it's an operator's license undertaking. I'm looking at that at my forums as well. And, you know, can I link the drivers who've been speeding with the drivers who've had the most events, with the drivers who have most incidents, and having that conversation with them? I mean, getting cameras was a real game changer for me back in the day, because, you know, from the very first week, the realization that Joe Public lie. And when you have those cameras, you can defend your drive, and drivers need to understand. And when they realize that these cameras are defending them, and importantly, if you've got the sound, because the truth is told there in the kind of the very moment, those are just really key to defending. So the cameras, your telematics, you're looking at your driving styles. But again, just if you think that 80% of the transport community have 15 vehicles or less, and they're probably going out driving themselves, sometimes lying under the truck doing some maintenance on a Saturday and doing the invoicing on a Sunday. We really need to make it easy for these companies for our road safety. So so bite-sized portions, look at the data, and filter it down to your transport team and to your drivers, and have that kind of productive conversation, not assertive, not aggressive.
Good segue to you, Jason. Obviously, it's useful to have the technology, but even more important to do something with it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a good point from Lesley there, that sometimes, you know, fleets can feel like they're drowning in data. You know, we have a lot of reports that we can provide, but the danger is you still need to go through those. So, you know, it's on us really to keep refining those and allow fleet managers to easily spot trends. And I think that's where AI is coming in. You know, we're beta testing AI in our driver behavior area, so you can start to ask it questions and look at certain areas and focus in on those and spot those trends. So I think AI is going to be really valuable there, because, you know, I've sat on different committees. I'm on the LCV committee at the AFP, and the fleet managers do say, you know, it's just me, or I've got a small team and there's a lot of data. So yeah, the more we can help in that area, then it'll be better for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, do you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, it was just linking back to cars, because that's what I do. And with the introduction with all the driver assist systems, one of the things we have in our driver handbook is requesting that drivers don't turn off the ADAS, the lane assist, unless it's causing them a distraction or potentially going to cause them a problem. So with some vehicles, the lane assist is a little bit too keen. And so certainly where I live, there's lots of rural lanes, and you might need to go around a pothole. It may be that it's actually better in that scenario to turn the lane keeping assist off. But we advise, you know, when drivers get their new cars, to really familiarize themselves, and then before they make any journey, to make sure that they've got their entertainment sorted, that they've got their sat nav route plugged in, and that they've got their heating and cooling set, so that they don't touch anything other than the steering wheel whilst driving.
Mm-hmm. Lesley, I just want to come back to you with a question that's come into the chat around the cameras. So Suzanne Neville says, you know, they've just started to have cameras installed in their vans. Quite a few engineers that aren't very happy. You sort of touched on it a little bit, but how did you overcome this situation?
Okay, so we've had cameras for kind of quite a while now, so it's hard to remember what it was like without having them. And I think it's telling the drivers that actually they are there to protect them, and, you know, they are the professional drivers, and if they drive professionally, they've nothing to be worried about. They will protect them. But I will talk about internal facing cameras. So a couple of years ago, we took the internal facing cameras. It was like World War III with the drivers, because that was the spy in the camp. And we had to really say, listen, when you stop for 2 minutes or more, they go off. You can cover them, but actually I have removed them. And the reason I have removed them is that I was getting so much false information that I just couldn't control it. So, you know, a driver was scratching his head and I was told that he was smoking, and it was all this, and I had reams and reams of this information that was not accurate. And then I kind of narrowed it down and said, okay, just give me the information of drivers using their mobile phone. Let's take it in baby steps. And kind of at the end of the year, when I only had one, okay, that one could have been a major incident. I do get that. But for the time, I'm thinking, you know, going back to my solicitor saying, if you have that information, you have to look at it. I could not possibly look at it all. So the step, and I had someone external feeding it to me, but I took the initiative, rightly or wrongly, in that let's wait until it's a little bit more advanced, because I'm getting wrong information, and far better spending on my money on the drug and alcohol tests, because that is surprising information you get from that.
Thank you. Well, talking about, sorry, Aaron, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, technology's moved on now since that, Lesley. So, you know, the very false positives are very small now. The technology is really, really good, and it does pick up on those things. People, human being, aren't we? No one wants to sit there looking at somebody all day long, and they think you're going to be sitting there looking at everyone all day long. So you just tell them that, you know, we're only going to view it if there's an incident and a reason for us to view it. If you're wearing your seatbelt, you're not on your mobile phone, and you're not smoking, then there's no reason for us to look at you, is there? Or get a picture of that camera or anything. So you've just got to do it that way and just say, look, this is here to defend you in an incident, because if you hit a pedestrian or a cyclist and we can prove that what you were doing was what you should be doing, then it's mitigating for you, you know, and stuff like that. So you've got to do it that way as well, not just go, oh, I don't want to be I don't want people looking at me or listening to me singing on the radio. Or that's not what we're doing. That's the way you've got to do it. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be going back to it.
Yeah.
Jason, did you want to come in on that point as well?
Yeah, no, I probably agree with Aaron. I think that the technology has come a long way. You know, I've myself, because we tend to have the cameras in our own vehicles, so we can experience them ourselves. I think if you go back a few years, you would get some false positives, but yeah, we're seeing it improve all the time now. And you know, that mobile phone, it seems to be such a temptation for people. I've seen so many clips where the eyelids are dropping, and it's usually looking at a phone, not necessarily fatigue. But I think people get so tempted by it. If they've got it on their passenger seat, they'll see a light shine at the corner of their eye, and they just want to see what that text is. So to cut out that sort of behaviour, or that, you know, that desire from the driver to want to do that, I think it's just so important.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to stay with you, Jason. Lesley mentioned you know, return on investment, you know, getting good value for your money in terms of where you're spending. Lee Jackson asks around that kind of business case. How do you get that business case to support the financial investment and return on investment in, you know, what can be, what's in your case, but can be quite expensive technology?
Yeah. Hi, Lee. Yeah, I mean, obviously we have lots of case studies to show the return on investment, and obviously primarily the reduction in accidents themselves and the knock-on effect to insurance and the resulting premiums it should be an ROI in itself. But I think, you know, there's also brand protection for the business, which could be hugely valuable. And we certainly see, if you just look at speeding, really, if you just had that one improvement in terms of speeding, as the knock-on effects to maintenance costs, be it, you know, braking equipment or tire wear. And, you know, there's so many roles now in every business around sustainability. So if you can slow down your drivers a bit and make them drive a bit more smoothly, then the knock-on effect is less CO2 as well. And most companies probably on here and those that are listening in today are now having to report around sustainability and what they're doing around carbon reduction. So I think it's probably, you know, exploring in your own business those other stakeholders and the knock-on effects to the rest of the business to gain more support for that investment.
Mm-hmm. So just following on from that, Alison, you've made a case or two for investment in safety equipment in the past. What kind of works?
I think you need a clear business plan, and I think for hopefully most people on this call, the fact that we're making people safe is enough. But I think we've got to be mindful that not everybody that you speak to, and sometimes the people with the purse strings, that's not enough, or they need something more than that. So I think, you know, I've always made business cases by looking at the sort of crash damage, and that's always a very small percentage actually of what poor driving is costing a company. But even if you just take the crash damage over a year and include, you know, replacement vehicles and all that sort of thing, and then try and make it very personal to your business. So to say, you know, we've to sell X amount of widgets every year just to pay for our crash damage. We've to lay so much tarmac, miles of tarmac every year just to pay for our crash damage. It makes it very real and very tangible. And then when you go on to look at, you know, there's many case studies now on the internet from lots of companies. That's just the start of it. You know, saving, as Jason mentioned, maintenance costs, brake pads, fuel, huge one. You know, I think one of the companies that I work for, we saved nearly 17% in our fuel cost, and in a fleet of about 6,000 vehicles, that is an awful lot of money over the year, more than makes up for paying for telematics in a vehicle. So yeah, I think, you know, it's horses for courses. Some people, it is the safety element, but it's so easy to make a business case in terms of cost when you start to look at all the case studies and how much poor driving is actually costing a company.
Mm-hmm. Is it a similar situation for you, Aaron? And you know, you've invested in some technology that, you know, isn't widely used, so there isn't necessarily the case studies that you can relate to make the case. So how do you go about things?
But there's two ways. So it's obviously, if you didn't have half of this, I mean, what would your premiums be from the insurance company if you didn't show that you were doing things? But also insurance companies will help as well. Insurance companies will give bursaries for this type of thing. So, you know, we've had a bursary from our insurance to fit the, you know, the FOSS field and the Halo system and the driver in-cab cameras and all of that type of stuff. So, and also we've done some pretty intense accident videos, which I'll share with you, Stephen, once they've been clipped down. And that's for everything. That's for car drivers, managers, LCV drivers, HCVs, and it's all about the implications of what happens in an accident. So we have a police officer talking in it, we have a paramedic talking in it, and we have a lawyer talking in it about the implications of what's going to happen by being on your mobile phone or cause an accident by that sort of thing. So the insurance will help a lot with the cost of it. And like I say, if we didn't have these things, what would our premiums be? They'd be astronomical.
Absolutely. We're obviously fortunate to have not only an expert in fleet safety, but also a magistrate on the panel in Alison. So I suppose following on from those, you know, financial return on investments and business cases, what about the legal responsibilities and those obligations of not just the fleet managers, but of course company directors?
Yeah, I think this is something that is misunderstood, certainly in a lot of companies. And I think, you know, what you do in the event of an incident is almost pales into insignificance of what you need to be doing to stop those incidents happening in the first place. And, you know, very importantly, somebody mentioned telephone calls before, and I think what people forget is that there are lots of things that we do from a management perspective that make or aid and abet the drivers to do things that are not safe. So whether that be expecting people to do days that are too long, exceeding driving hours, not having the ability to stay over if it's going to be too long a day, not having a mobile phone policy that also extends to the office and to managers to say, you do not ring people when they are driving, you do not expect people to join calls when they are driving, because in the event of a serious collision, and a fatality obviously being the worst one, everything that driver was doing at the time is going to be included in the investigation. And I think as a company, you have to be absolutely sure in your own mind that nothing you have done or permitted to happen, and this goes back, you know, to what Lesley was saying about having the data in a format that you can understand and actually action. If that driver speed was involved in that incident and you have telematics data that shows 57% of that driver's time is speeding, we've known about that 6 months, what have we done about it? Nothing. That culpability is moving further and further and further and further towards the managers and the directors. In case of, you know, fleets that have an operating license, whoever's the signature on the operator license. And there are lots of different pieces of legislation. Everybody talks about corporate manslaughter, very rarely gets used, but there are still lots and lots of pieces of health and safety legislation by which companies and directors and managers can be prosecuted under. So I think it's about you know, making sure that everything you've got in place in terms of your policies for everybody and the managers of drivers, really, really important, because at the end of the day, you want to look after the drivers. But if you have done everything that you can to make sure that driver is safe, you need to be able to show that. I've unfortunately been involved in investigating 2 fatalities at different companies I've worked for, and the fact that I could produce everything, training records, license check records, you know, the welfare things that we've done with the drivers, the health declarations. You think to the Glasgow bin lorry situation, you know, you can show that we've taken all these things into consideration. Okay, it doesn't stop that fatality from happening, but it does protect you as a business. And I think that's quite important, because if you are doing all that's right, you need to be able to show that pretty quickly in terms of a fatality.
I mean, following on from that then, and looking at, you know, we've talked a lot about sort of mitigating risk and potential incidents. You know, accidents do happen, not accidents, sorry, incidents do happen, and some of them can be serious. So what are the fleets on the panel? What are your various processes in the event of a serious incident? You know, how do you handle the situation? How do you handle any impacts on the driver's mental well-being? Sarah, if I come to you first, and then I'll move to Matt and then Aaron.
Thank you. So thankfully, never been involved in anything really serious, but we would always take a people first approach. So the couple of times I have been the first call after an incident, the first step is make sure that the driver is okay. Is there anything that they need me to do immediately? And after that, it's a question of establishing the facts. But from a driver perspective, that thinking back to the one time that someone did call me, through my brain, I was listening that we could be at fault. There was an incident involving a motorbike, and my driver was doing something perhaps not correct. But I kept that to myself and just helped that person work through the trauma that they'd just been through. Luckily, no one was hurt. After that, it was a question of making sure all of the right details were recorded at the scene for the insurance. And after that, it was lessons learned. What could we have done to prevent it? So just the way that preventing accidents generally would be driver education. We have procedures with the drivers, what to do in the event of any accident, and we encourage them to keep them in their cars. So again, being company car fleet, you can always encourage, you can advise, you can suggest, but to enforce and to check would be the next step for us. I think that's, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Matt.
Well, for us, it's very much like how Sarah's just described. I mean, clearly the focus has to be on the individual and ensuring that anyone involved or anyone impacted by any incident is taken care of. Because of the nature of what we do, 17-year-olds driving our vehicles, they're classed as minors. We also have strong safeguarding policies and procedures. So it's all wrapped into the same concept really for us as a company. What I would add is that we also need to be mindful about how these incidents can affect us and our team members. You know, you might receive a dashcam clip and you're not quite prepared for what you're about to see. Are you braced for the call that you may get, or the call that you then have to make yourself? And we're now trying to work with an independent mental health company. It's completely confidential. Our instructors can use it and we won't necessarily even know about it, but that's also available to our staff. And we do think that is quite important. Now, luckily, we haven't had a serious fatality, but it could happen and you've got to be ready for it.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron?
People.
So you just gone back onto mute, I think.
Has it come off now?
Yep. Now you're good.
Very, very similar, to be fair. As everyone, the people are the most important thing. We call them blue light incidents. So if any of the blue light divisions are called out, within our accident management, there is a hierarchy of what they need to do, and that's who to contact. Well, that's myself, my accident manager, our compliance manager, the line manager for the driver, and then we would deploy somebody there if there was a need to it, if there was some serious injuries. We would offer legal advice, but also well-being person for them to go to if they needed to go to hospital, or we'd have our own people there and take control of that. But also, like say, legal advice. So if they were arrested, our driver or something, we would deploy a solicitor to the police station wherever they are and take it over that way. And Matt's right. Sometimes we're going to have to look at that footage if we did cause some serious injury to somebody, and who's going to do that. There is some counselling for the people who would do that. So yeah, luckily we haven't had that whilst I've been at Speedy, but we have hit a cyclist and caused some serious injury. And it was just a lack of concentration. We turned across his path. He came behind a bus, and there was a lot of the driver was taken off the road, and he was seen by mental health advisors and everything until he was safe and felt himself that he was capable of going back on the road before he went back on again. So yeah, people is very, very important to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Lesley, what are the processes that you would deploy?
Okay. Nobody likes to think that the unthinkable could happen, but it could. So for us, training of our drivers and giving drivers the confidence of what to do should this happen starts at induction. So if our driver was involved in a blue light incident on the road, they would not be ringing me. They would not be ringing any of our team. Straight away, they would be ringing our legal helpline. And the solicitor, not Ethnol, which is the golden hour, which is too late. And if you've tried ringing Ethnol, enjoy yourself hanging on the phone. This is immediately speaking to a solicitor who will speak to the police, and they will go to the scene of the incident, or they will go to the police station. And our drivers have specific instruction that the only information they give is their name and details and the vehicle that they were driving. They do not give a recount of what happened, no matter how guilty or how sorry they feel for the person there. And the police will be saying, tell me what happened. But actually, they have a right to remain silent and to have legal assistance. No different to if someone attacked me in the office now, then that person would have the right to be represented. And drivers absolutely have that right at roadside. I understand they feel vulnerable. So our drivers have a letter that they show to the police saying that they absolutely want to help, but they want to get their legal assistance with them. They are told not to complete the app stating what happened, because the police will take the telephone. So don't fill any of that in, just ring that number. And if they can't remember the number, it's in the driver's handbook, it's on the app, it's printed out, but they ring that number. If they haven't had the time to ring us, then the solicitors will ring us, and we have a crisis management group that will then take over. So it's us working with the solicitors and working with our broker. This kind of a thing, we have insurance, don't we, for our directors and our senior management. Why aren't we doing this for our drivers? Because the police know that the drivers have the right to be represented. Simple questions. I didn't have a rough night's sleep. The baby kept me up. Did you tell your transport? Yeah, he knew, but and all of a sudden they're incriminating themselves and they're incriminating the company. And I would say to people who are here, if your insurers say you have this, you absolutely do. 2 years down the line when it goes to court, but when you need it is at the time of the incident, when the police will be picking all that information. So yes, we want to help, but we want the drivers to have that help as well.
Okay. And Alison, moving on to you, what's your advice around the sort of processes that fleet should have in place, to kind of deal with, with a serious incident?
I think one of the most important things is you need two really important teams. You need, as Lesley quite rightly says, you need that external legal team, but you also need an internal team who are trained and understand what needs to happen and what should not happen when something like this occurs, in terms of, who to you need somebody who will speak to the press. You do need like quite a comprehensive team so that you can contain it until you know what's happened. So I think they're both really important. I think for me, probably more my focus would be about doing a proper investigation internally as well. So clearly in a serious one, there will be an external, but to do your own investigation, because you do need to stop these things reoccurring. And one, other thing, and again, it's about language really, is to, yes, of course, the insurance are looking at fault and non-fault. The police are looking at culpability. You can't get away from that. But I think internally, when you're doing your own investigations, is to start looking at it as avoidable and non-avoidable, because legally and from an insurance point of view, your driver might not be culpable for it, but actually, was that avoidable if they'd been driving in a slightly better or more in control way? And we found that, there are a lot more things that are avoidable for a driver that might not necessarily mean that he was legally at fault. But at the end of the day, you don't want a driver being involved in any sort of collision, because there are obviously potential injury to them, but also the mental effect it has on drivers, even when they've not been in any way at fault. If they've injured somebody, people don't get over that easily. A lot of people, it will affect them for the rest of their lives. So I think, yes, absolutely, you need the teams in place, both internally and externally, that those contact numbers straight away, people have got them, because the worst thing is people they overtalk when they're quite often when they're panicking and the police turn up, and maybe other blue light services, they want to be over helpful. They're not always doing the right thing at that point. So I think it is about education, people understanding what to do, but then internally, you finding out what is the proper root cause of that incident, and then, putting measures in place to stop it happening again.
Mm-hmm. Lesley?
Yeah, I would just add one thing on there. Absolutely internal investigation, but I would get my legal people doing that as well, to have the benefit of being legally privileged. Otherwise, the police can come in, take all those notes that you've just scribbled down and put something again down that could incriminate you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're quite right, Lesley, and just, all you need literally is for your solicitor to request you to do an internal investigation on behalf of them, and then it's legally privileged. So you can still do your internal investigation, but you've actually got it protected.
Just got a few minutes left. Just going to ask the four fleets just very briefly if they could look back at all the things that they've done so far on their fleet, and just tell me, I know everything is a combination of various things, but what's been a standout success that's had a significant impact on safety within your fleet? Aaron, I'll come to you first.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, well, fitting the FOSS field, to be fair, one of our biggest accident causes is slow manoeuvring incidents, whether that's driving forward or reverse. And all the vehicles we fitted with the FOSS field have not had any slow manoeuvring incident since we fitted it. So, that's 20% of our fleet now that are not having slow manoeuvring accidents. So that is big for us. Okay,
thanks. Lesley?
I think this is really difficult, because it's, if I could just do one thing, my life would be really easy. It's just a mixture of all of them. Clearly the cameras, my drug and alcohol testing, but everything just adding together and creating that culture. Just one thing just wouldn't make it for me. It's like a building block, and building that culture.
Absolutely. No, I totally get that. Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Lesley, and also something that Alison was discussing earlier as well, about leading by example. It's important to take away those potentially risky temptations from your drivers, and sometimes you have to make decisions on their behalf. So just a couple of examples that we've done. We've now stopped allowing pupils to book short notice test cover. So that might be where they've got a test at very short notice, they haven't got an instructor, and they suddenly call up saying, "Can you help me?" Our answer now is no. We need at least 2 or 3 weeks notice. We need an instructor to have seen what you like inside the vehicle before you are even allowed to use our car on your test. Similarly, we don't do intensive courses anymore. We just don't believe that creates a safe driver. Now, both those decisions are potentially taking income away from our instructors. And if an instructor's had an unlucky week where some of his pupils have, cancelled lessons at short notice, you get where they're coming from. They want to be able to earn the money, but we make that decision for them, and that's us setting the standard. We've also just recently introduced a zero tolerance policy on hands-free device use, and we are demonstrating how we're following that from the top by cancelling or rescheduling calls immediately if anyone calls us and they're on the phone. But also we've empowered our sales team to not progress with a call if they're calling out to someone who may be on the phone. Again, not always a popular decision, but it's the right thing to do. And what we're trying to show our drivers is that we get it, but we're all in this together.
Okay, thanks. And then Sarah.
So my biggest one was implementing grey fleet checks via an online portal. It's the same portal we use for driving licence checks. And I think that's had the biggest, it's given me the proof data of what I already suspected. And it's helped our drivers to understand that they need to have business insurance, which is different from social domestic pleasure commuting.
Okay, thank you. Jason, did you want to make any final comments based on the discussions we've had?
Yeah, and I think sort of following on from what Matt said, really, we've seen quite a lot of success with some of our clients where it's been maybe some simple messaging and also appropriate sort of zero tolerance to things like phones and things like speeding. Something like speeding, one thing that you can sort of mandate as a zero tolerance from the CEO down, let's all do this as an organization, has such a knock-on effect, and it keeps it simple. And then you can build from there when you start to see other trends evolve.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, it's 3 o'clock. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar, sponsored by Webfleet. I'd like to thank my panel for their thoughts and advice. So Matt Thomas, Alison Moriarty, Aaron Powell, Sarah Wellstead, Lesley O'Brien, and from our sponsor partner, Webfleet, Jason Gill. You can listen to this webinar again via a link that we will email out to you within the next week. And of course, please do forward it on to anyone else that you feel would benefit from watching today's discussion, and encourage them to sign up for future Fleet News webinars via the registration site on the Fleet News website. I hope you found this webinar useful. I think there was lots of really good discussion and lots of great advice that hopefully you can implement into your own fleet operations. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.